northwest coast of Ireland lies County Sligo, one of the most historically rich, abundant and interesting parts of Ireland, despite its remoteness on the Atlantic shoreline, very far from Central Europe. The county itself is one of the most megalith-rich areas in all of Europe. Not only are there numerous structures from the Neolithic era, there also includes a large number of Bronze Age ruins, as well as many early Christian ruins. Among these early Christian ruins, lying just outside the village of Strandhill, is Killisburgbourne Church. The church dates back to a period between 1150 and 1220, but the original structure was reputedly built sometime in the 5th century, when Christianity had just made its foothold in Ireland. Its former name, Cashel suggests it was most likely enclosed by a circular stone fort or a cashel, typical of an early Irish monastic settlement, and generally these structures were taken over from previous pagan or druidic sites. There is a headland adjacent to the church which is called Dunaglera. Killisburgbourne got its name from its founder, Bronnus, a native of Coolera, a bishop and one of the spiritual leaders of the barony of Carbery. Coolera is the old name for this area that lies on the peninsula and wraps around Knocknarea Mountain, where Queen Maeve waits in her massive cairn at the summit of the mountain, which directly translates as the Mountain of the Moon. There is an inscription regarding Bronus in Sligo Cathedral as follows:
Bronus, a spirit visited Cashel, Dura Appreciati, Orientius, Modus Esser.
Of 512 AD. The church of Bishop Bronus was a religious centre for not only the immediate surrounding settlements, but also for the whole northwest of the country. Bishop Bronus lived to an old age and died on the 8th of June 511 AD. St. Patrick himself is reputed to have visited the church at Killisburgbourne. On crossing from Killisburgbourne to Coney Island, he was surrounded by an incoming tide and took refuge on a small inlet, which can be seen directly in front of the church as you look towards Sligo town, now called Donapatrick, Patrick's Little Fort. It is well known that no matter how high the tide rises, the inlet is never covered. On the occasion of visiting the church, St. Patrick reputedly tripped on the rough ground and lost a tooth. As a mark of friendship, he gave the tooth to Bronus, who enshrined it in the church. The relic was regarded with reverence, and documents show that at some stage during the 14th century, Thomas de Birmingham, Lord of Athenry, whose family owned the property near Killisburgbourne, enshrined it in a golden casket. However, the shrine fell into the hands of local chieftains who mistreated it until it was acquired again by the Abbot of Cong. For a time after that, it was kept by the Blake family, and after that it was presented to the Royal Academy of Ireland by Dr. Stokes. The shrine can be viewed today at the National Museum of Ireland in Dublin. The church operated as it did for years, but during the Reformation in the 16th century, it was handed over to the Protestant community. The graveyard at Killisburgbourne was used right up until 1961. A local man named Tady Higgins was the last to be buried there. Many graves have no headstones, as few people could afford such a luxury. The majority of graves have marker stones to define the burial sites, and this was common in graveyards prior to the 16th century. The graveyard is multi-denominational, and many of the landlord families of the area are buried there. Within the 1 acre site, there is an estimated 700 graves. The boundary wall and many graves were stacked, as was common at the time. Walk around the graveyard, you'll see the gravestones marking the resting places of young babies and a man aged 102. For centuries, islanders from nearby Coney Island were laid to rest in this cemetery, with mourners walking across the strand when the tide was out. In the early 19th century, the residents of the village beside Killisburgbourne Church were forced to evacuate when their homes were gradually engulfed by the blowing drifting sand. The harsh coastal weather and drifting sands have long since buried the original village. The church itself consists of a single-chambered rectangular structure with internal dimensions of approximately 15 meters by 5 meters. The wall faces have random coursed mortared masonry. Simulacra encrusted limestone and sandstone is predominantly used in the main construction. The side walls of the church are standing to their original height, except for the west and south wall, where approximately half a metre of the top is missing. This church had a steeply pitched roof, as evidenced by the east gable wall, which still remains. At the west, the complete primary gable wall was retained when a late medieval tower was built on top of it. Access to the church is provided through the south doorway positioned close to the west end. It was noted that in the last century a semicircular arch on the doorway still stood, which was built in the Romanesque style. The doorway has mostly collapsed with only the basal jamb surviving. The plain east window has a semicircular head in typical Romanesque style that has been dated circa 1150 to circa 1220. It is situated in the centre of the wall above the altar and is 1.3 metres above the foundation plinth. Constructed with 4 worked sandstone blocks, the ope has an external chamfer. It is built of worked sandstone dressed with the original diagonal tooling. When one walks around the site, Killisbrugborn, one is struck by the fact that it appears to be much older than even the 5th century, and even the 11th century building that still remains hints at an infrastructure and a complex that owed itself to a more ancient time. The circular nature of the site typifying a ring fort, its location on the bay, and more importantly, its location at the heart of megalithic Sligo. Nearby is the remains of a court cairn known locally as Giant's Grave, which has been established to be from Neolithic times. The church represents a building upon previous heathen structures, although we do not have any records of this, as many of these records were either lost or conveniently forgotten with the passage of time. Killisbrugborn calls to us from the deep antiquity of Irish history. Although there's not any direct evidence linking Killisbrugborn churchyard and settlement, Christian settlement, with anything relating to pre-Christian, Druidic or pagan sites, it would be surprising if this was not the case here. Firstly, we have the phenomena of churchyards and Christian sites and monastic sites from the 5th century in Ireland being built directly upon previous pagan or Druidic sites of importance. We're also based here at the tip of the Cuilrea Peninsula, which is also one of the megalithically rich areas in all of Europe, not just Ireland. This location would very much be in the heart and the spirit of the idea of the Druid code, of the early transition of Christianity and the migration of the Druids within the early Christian church, moving from paganism towards Christianity. Although the building behind me is from the 11th century, the area does have strong associations with St. Patrick, and there was a monastic ring fort settlement here, or a cashel as they're known, from the earliest times. So we're probably talking about 2,000 years ago. So it's a certainty that Killisbrugborn churchyard was originally a pagan settlement in the middle of a very much a Druidic landscape.